Today's lecture will be over Chapter 28, Section 4, Objectives. Number 1, examine Japan's history. Number 2, describe Japan's economic development. Number 3, identify aspects of Japan culture. Number 4, examine cultural aspects of life in Japan. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the map. And as you can see right here, Japan's going to be located to the west of the United States. Now, a lot of people think that this ocean here, it's a great distance, which it is if you start looking at the mainland. But if you consider Hawaii and also Alaska, you're going to see that Japan is a little bit closer to the United States than some people kind of think about. Now, Japan also has got an interesting relationship, geographically speaking. They're connected to North Korea, South Korea with the Sea of Japan, and they're also going to be very close to China and also Mongolia, and also the Soviet Union. So we see this area right here becoming very important to Japan because, of course, they are going to be kind of an island off the mainland, but also close to a lot of major powers in that Pacific Ocean. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a video that talks about the samurai in Japan.
The samurai. In the Heian period, the imperial court relied on agriculture produced in distant estates. The wealthy landowners of these estates hired warriors to defend themselves from raids by local chieftains. By the 12th century, political power had shifted significantly away from the emperor. The Genpei War of 1180 to 1185 pitted the Taira clan, with sworn loyalty to the emperor, against the Minamoto clan, and the Minamoto's victory established the Kamakura shogunate, a hereditary military dictatorship. The samurai warrior trained by serving under his master and following a strict code called Bushido, the way of the warrior. In battle, the warrior would decapitate his defeated enemy and mount the head on a spike. For a samurai who was facing defeat or dishonor, seppuku or harakiri was performed. This involved the warrior committing suicide by cutting into his belly with a dagger. As part of Bushido, samurai who had lost their master were also expected to commit harakiri. Those who did not became ronin or drifters. Often there was stigma attached to being a masterless ronin, and many found other ways to make a living with their swords, becoming mercenaries or turning to crime. Samurai were experts in fighting both on horseback and on the ground. They used a variety of weapons: bows and arrows, spears, and eventually guns. However, their main and most symbolic weapon was the sword. In the late 13th century, Masamune Okazaki invented the unique dual structure of soft and hard steel that is one of the key characteristics of the katana. The sword came to have great significance, and eventually samurai would carry two types: the katana, a long sword, and the wakizashi, a short sword. In the 15th century, the shogun's power was waning, and a century-long period of fighting for dominance between local lords began, the Warring States period. Oda Nobunaga succeeded in uniting half of the clans in the late 16th century, but he was betrayed by one of his vassals and committed seppuku before national unification was complete. Stability was finally brought in the 17th century with the beginning of the Tokugawa shogunate, headed by Tokugawa Ieyasu. At this point, the social order was also frozen, with samurai at the top of the social hierarchy. However, despite their high social position, the material well-being of many samurai began to decline. With relatively stable peace, the importance of martial skills declined, and many samurai took on careers as bureaucrats or teachers. Subscribe for more history videos. Get Simple History Japan.
Okay, so what we're looking at is we're looking at the samurai and the shogun and how the history of Japan had kind of developed. What we see is that the first people of Japan are going to come from the South Pacific or from Siberia to Korea and then over to Japan. About 1500 years ago, agricultural metalworking is going to be widely practiced. Till about the 300 AD, Japan has many clans, but the Yamamoto clan rules by the 400s. By the 600s, Yamamoto leaders call themselves the Japan. Now, one thing to kind of realize about Japan is that Japan is going to have a long history, and it's kind of an interesting history when you start looking at this island, because what happens is that there's a bunch of clans all over, and these clans continue to fight and fight, and the emperor is going to go ahead and he's going to become very famous. He should be very powerful. Then he's going to move around a lot, and what we see is that in Japan for a long period of time, this fighting is going to continue to happen over and over. Now, the capital moves from Kyoto in 1794, and the Han period lasts until about 1185. Now, when this happens, the samurai, one who guards, are going to be hired soldiers that serve as landowners and chiefs. These samurai are going to be people that are going to be fighting for these clans and basically for the protection. 1192, after these clan struggles, the emperor creates a shogun position. And what a shogun is it's a general of the emperor's army with military dictator powers. So what essentially happens with the shogun is that they control officials, judges, armies, they pick governors. They are in almost complete control of the government. As long as the emperor is happy with what they're doing, they will continue to grow in power, and they will continue to have power really more than just military, but all over. During the 700-year shogun rule, Japan fights off Mongolian invasion. Portuguese traders are going to bring Christianity and firearms in the 1500s. Now, this makes Japan kind of isolated because they become so powerful that nobody's able to really take them over, and nobody really messes with them for a long time. But 1853, a guy by the name of Matthew Perry, a United States Commodore, is going to end Japan's isolation. What he does is that he comes in and essentially forces them to trade with the Western groups. Now, the last shogun is going to resign in 1864, and the emperor does become the head of the state and kind of rules. Now, by the 20th century, Japan has become a major power. What happens is that after World War I, they're kind of miffed because they didn't have much to say on the bargaining table about what should happen to Germany, what should happen with the rest of the world when people start dividing it up after the Great War. So what happens is that they start getting a little bit more dangerous with their military, and they start invading China, and they really start to become kind of a thorn in a lot of people's sides. Now, this goes to the story that we know in the United States, that on December 7th, 1941, famously said, a date that will live in infamy by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Japan is going to attack Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which was a naval base at the time, and the attack is going to bring the United States into the war. Now, what we see is that Japan is defeated by 1945, and usually that's where the story ends. But what the United States does is that they will continue to occupy this land. They're going to bring political and economic reforms. They also bring Japan democracy. It's going to be a constitutional monarchy. Remember, constitutional monarchy means a constitution that basically limits the power of the government, and the emperor and an elected parliament is going to be kind of the way that their government works. So again, the United States isn't running Japan, but they're really influencing it because of what happened in World War II. Now, post-war economic boom makes Japan's economy really good. It's second basically to the United States. Of 126 million people, 75% are living in the cities, 60% live on about 2.7% of the land, meaning a lot of people, really small areas. But most people are going to be in the industrialization sector. They're going to live along the coast of Honshu, which is the mainland. Japan imports resources, manufactures them, and then exports them. And this is going to make it so that Japan, they don't have a lot of resources, but because they do such a good job of exporting, they're going to become really an economic power. Automobiles, electronics, computers, all real big inside Japan for trade. We also see strong ties between the business and the government, also helps the economy. What we see though is that after about 4 decades, you're going to see an economic slowdown in the 1990s. Now there's a few reasons for this. Number one, regional competition. Taiwan, South Korea, and Hong Kong all use the same type of model that Japan does in terms of trying to produce as much as they can with little natural resources. Japan's investments in South Asian economies economies start to lose value. Japan's stock market has big losses. Also, one thing that we see, Japan is going to save rather than spend. And a lot of people, a lot of economics people would say, hey, that's a good thing. You want to save as much as you can. But what we see statistically is that when people are saving money, the government doesn't make any money off of that because they're not paying taxes on things like if you buy a car, you're going to go ahead and you're going to pay taxes on that. And so when they start saving rather than spending, that can hurt the overall economy. And then we also see the declining exports. We just see that this kind of forces the economy to slow down. Now, Chinese is going to be influenced by language, religion, art, music, government. They all have kind of got the Chinese type of people in Japan. Kyoto is going to show ideas of beauty in gardens, palaces, Buddhist temples. No plays are going to be developed in the 1300s. Kabuki plays in the 1600s. Colorful scenery, costumes. We're also going to see paintings have Chinese influence. Early paintings have Buddhist themes. Art is going to be included in the picture scrolls, ink pads, wood block prints, all of these things. Western influences, since Matthew Perry's arrival, Japan is going to start to become open to the Western influences, particularly the United States. Popular sports are baseball. Again, that's going to be originated in the United States. You're going to see golf, sumo wrestling, soccer, tennis. Golf, soccer, and tennis are going to be developed really inside the United Kingdom. And so you can see these Western influences on Japanese culture. Most clothes are going to be Western, traditional clothes for special occasion. You're also going to see Western music is popular, rock and roll, classical music, jazz. Younger generation of Japanese people form rock bands. And Japan is going to be an interesting area because they're going to be influenced by their old kind of Chinese ancestral people, but they're also going to be kind of influenced by their Western influences as well in Western countries. Now, last but not least, education, very highly structured educational system. Students in school spend 6 days a week, 6 weeks of summer vacation, 6 years of elementary school, 3 years of junior high, 3 years of high school. Japan has more than 1,000 universities and tech schools, and so they put a high emphasis on education. Also, people are demanding an end to pollution and overcrowding, so you're starting to see kind of a change in society's views. Workers are asking for shorter work days and also more vacation time. This concludes Chapter 28, Section 4. Please complete your assessments at this time.